Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to another beautiful interview on 2023 Spilling the Astro Tea panel. I am super pumped to be here with one of my long-time friends of astrology, and all we do is talk cosmic language. That's the only thing we know how to do, and whether that's talking about the housewives and their signs or normal stuff, it's all or nothing with us, and it's just constantly astrology. So I'm excited to have back again for the second year in a row, beautiful Katie.
Hi, thank you, love. Thank you. And yeah, definitely, I feel like eventually some kind of like Real Housewives of Astrology combo has to happen. So keep that in mind, everyone. That's coming maybe next year.
Yes, I think that would be it'd be quite interesting next year, like for us to be really, because there's a couple of new ones coming, and we've always got lots to say about the housewives, don't we?
Too much maybe, but I could talk about it as much as I talk about astrology, to be honest. Yeah. So
it's a good time. So I'm super pumped, and as we all know, I'm asking every astrologer I get on this same question, which is, what do you love most about astrology? And it's a hard one, I know, but give it to us straight.
All right, so what do I most love about astrology? I think that the way I would actually answer that has probably changed in the last few years, because I recognize now that, being a neurodivergent woman, that astrology, like, it's always been my thing since I was 9 years old, but now I understand like why it's always been my thing. And I'm so grateful that something that has been like my special interest, my obsession, something I probably drove everybody around me mad with my whole life, has been able to become what sustains me. And, I'm very aware that that is not something that everybody is perhaps able to fulfill so easily in life. I think so often, Tiani, right, like people are coming to us because they're seeking, what's my purpose? What am I here to do? What is there for me beyond the job that I have? And I think that definitely, in my early 30s, to be at a place where like I'm so consistent with that, and actually have been for so long, astrology has just been everything for me, I think. So hopefully that answers that kind of broad question in a way that personalizes it a little bit. But yeah, I mean, astrology, like, it's everything, right?
Love that. Yeah. Look, it's a really shit question to have to answer as an astrologer. And if someone asked me that, I'd just be like, oh my God, I've got one simple word and it's everything. So, like, I get that. But then when we nuance it, and we start to unpack it and go a little bit deeper with it too, we can find where it's, for some people, it's where that saved their lives or gave them the permission to be themselves. Some people, whilst they're astrologers, they weren't really, it wasn't their passion when they were a child like it was for us. It wasn't the language that for me, this is, I don't know anything but astrology. So for me, I wouldn't know how to live like a corporate life or do a normal job. Like, I've never done that before. Astrology has been my whole thing. But for some people, they find it in a time where it gives them permission to break free, or a transit, a Saturn return, or something happens to them that really signifies such a great change for them. And it gives them the permission then to be who they are and to then traverse that, and they go in and they become an astrologer, but it's sort of like wasn't on the forefront of their mind. So it really is, I mean, as broad as the question is, sometimes when we start to sort of break it down, like we get, just like your answer, which was perfect, it just is, everything for you. And it's always been, it's making sense to you now as you've, gotten into your 30s as well. I love that. And of course the purpose stuff,
Of course. And I think that as well, like, also being neurodivergent, figuring people out, I always kind of didn't have a head start with that, I think I recognize now. And so astrology helped me understand people in a way that I could make sense of, and it was like a very sort of internal, private thing for me. Like, it's not about going out and going like, you're a Gemini and that means this. It was just like recognizing behaviors and patterns and being like, okay, I'm seeing this repeated theme in this person and it's showing up in this way, and so it really helped me kind of make sense of human beings, because as an Aquarius, and we're going to talk a lot about Aquarius today, I always say, like, being an Aquarius, like, I have my sun and my Mercury there. My Mercury's retrograde, it's my 12th house. I hate people, hate them, hate them, but I love humanity. Like I'm all here for the collective and where are we going and moving. But like on a day-to-day level, like I have zero patience, you know, and it's obviously something I'm trying to cultivate. And I think it's such an Aquarius experience, you know, that archetype is about like the bigger picture and the community and the collective rather than the individuals within it. But I think to actually master our sun sign, you know, we have to, you know, break through some of those shadow things. And the shadow for Aquarius is definitely low tolerance for human beings. And I think that's really important as we're going to be talking about Pluto in Aquarius today, because Pluto is the shadow. And so there's so much more to Pluto in Aquarius than just being like revolution and revolt. And these things are going to be huge in the next 20 years. Yes. But I think it's really important to unpack some of the shadow stuff. So I'm excited to get into that. I don't want to skip steps. Let's ease through this. But yeah, Pluto in Aquarius. As an Aquarius, of course, I'm excited about this, but also a little bit of trepidation. You know, Pluto is going to be on my sun. It's a few years away, thank God, but you know, it's definitely a once in a lifetime kind of transit. So if any of you are Aquarius dominants, you know, this is going to be massive. And if you are an Aquarius dominant or fixed as well, of course, because of the opposition and the squares, I would recommend having a chat to people who have a lot of Capricorn in their chart, because they've just been going through this since 2008. And I think that they're the kind of people that are now able to offer a lot of sage advice and wisdom on how to navigate such a broad collective transit and how that showed up for them personally. I mean, do you have any Capricorn placements, Tiani? I know you've got Cancer and Libra.
Yeah, so Joel, my husband's a Capricorn, Sun, Mercury, and South Node, and Pluto's on his descendant right now too. So it's gone Sun, South Node, Mercury, descendant. So I've been a part of that, obviously, because I've been with my husband for 20 plus years. So I've watched that. But for me, I've got Pluto opposite my moon, but no Capricorn placements bar my IC at 8 degrees. Yeah, so you know, that's what's so interesting about Pluto, and what I love about these transpersonal planets, as much as you do in a different way. Like, this is what we're talking about today, is Katie's like froth. Like, this is what she riffs on. This is her jam. And of course, straight away, you know, I had many of my astrologers wanting to talk Pluto and Aquarius, and I gave that job to Katie, because this is what she does the best. And she's an Aquarius, obviously, but this is her jam. And what I love about these outer planets is that not everyone's going to experience Pluto and their sun in their lives. You know, like I look at some charts and they've had Pluto hit 7 of their planets in 20 something years. Whereas for me, in 41 years, I've had him hit and conjunct 2 planets only. Yes, he has talked to other planets, but he's only hit 2 planets. So we watch these transits and how they shape the person and their experience with life. And it's very different for everyone, because unless you are a Capricorn sun or a Sag sun, depending on your age, you know, Pluto has gone through these signs in our lifetime. And you know, I will never have Pluto hit my sun in Taurus. You know, it's not something that I'll ever experience, you know, just like some people will have Pluto transit their 10th house, others will never get that. So these transits are, yes, much bigger than these catchphrase words and things like that. They're great to anchor in the energies if you're needing something cerebral, but you know, this is very much about experience. And I'm excited because, you know, what Katie's going to share now is more than just a transit. It's this cycle and looking back to the past, which she does so well. So, I mean, look, you know, I've got no Capricorn placement, so I can't give you a heads up, darling.
Yeah.
People survive, but people survive, you know.
Exactly. And that's what I think that's such a great thing to note here, Tiani, because there's so much fear around Pluto transits, or even just Pluto entering into different houses. You know, I recently had a conversation with a friend who was thinking that Pluto was going to be ingressing into her 4th house, which actually won't happen till much later because of her late degree of Aquarius. But, you know, for her, it was this feeling of like, oh my God, you know, we think that Pluto is like loss often. And so it's like, am I going to lose all of my family? Like, you know, is it just going to be constant, you know, death and all of these things? And it's like the 4th house is like your own inner space. So it is a complete transformation, and being in Aquarius, a complete revolution of the relationship to yourself through the pathway of your ancestors. So, you know, is there going to be death? Well, yes, but also like I've just had Pluto moving through my 11th and I've had family members pass away, you know, like none of us are immune to that. We can't just relegate these things to little pockets of charts. You know, that's where I think that astrology sometimes can be challenging to grasp when we're still in a space of learning and studying, because yeah, it's easy with a planet like Pluto to go, oh my God, you know, it's going through my 7th house. Every relationship I have, I'm going to lose. Or, you know, if I'm not in a relationship, well, now I'm never going to have a relationship for 20 years because it's in my 7th house. And it's like, no, you know, Pluto is so slow moving, you know, 248 to 250 years per sign. So Pluto will only ever move through a very
per cycle.
Per cycle, sorry, per sign. My God.
248 years in Scorpio. No. Mercury's retrograde.
We are recording this
Mercury is retrograde.
Yes.
Opposite Jupiter. So there's
I even
whole
wrote
lot of
notes
grace.
to make sure I wouldn't do things like that because it's just classic me. But anyway, I did it.
We're all going to do it.
Per rotation, exactly. So all 12 signs over 250 years. So especially in the way that Pluto is cycling now, because when Pluto is moving between Sagittarius and working its way back to Taurus, he is adding years onto his transit. So the generation that is coming through now, like those of us that are born, you know, from Scorpio and Sag onwards, you know, we are lessening the span of the houses that we experience. So what this means, I feel, is just that for our generation, and of course generations past, because these cycles always come around, is that there is, you know, a necessity for a deepening of each of those experiences that we have. Like, you know, my grandparents were born with Pluto in Cancer, and my grandmother, she's still alive. And so she has Pluto opposite Pluto right now. Whereas that is something that will be impossible for me to have. I mean, I hope over 100's too long for me, right? I want a long life, not that long. So, you know, it's really important to understand these Pluto transits because they are the driving force of our evolution. And so we don't wake up every day and go, oh my God, Pluto's in my 4th house, chaos, death, you know, pain, suffering. It's that in this instance with Pluto in Aquarius, a 20-year cycle, there is going to be a lot of evolutionary themes coming to you through that lens of that particular house, or also, of course, 2 houses, depending on what system you use, depending on what degree, you know, your house cusps are. You know, my cusps are very early, whereas this friend of mine, her cusps are quite late. So she actually won't have the house cusp shift of Aquarius until the end of this cycle. Actually, she's like a 27 degree, you know, Aquarius, you know, where for me it's 5 degrees. So it's really important to, what Tiani and I always say whenever we have like our cosmic combos, it's like, you got to know your own chart, especially with these transpersonal cycles, because again, as a student coming into astrology, the transpersonal cycles often feel really out of reach. Like I know when I was learning, I was like, oh, like I'm a Pluto in Scorpio generation, but oh, like all these people that are like 6 years older than me have this, and people that are like 6 years younger than me. Like, what does this mean? How does this affect me personally? And so knowing like your house cusps, you know, knowing what houses are up for you in this lifetime, you know, is it moving through, you know, the night area of the chart, the bottom of the chart, or is it moving through the day part of the chart? Even that is enough to start to sort of differentiate how you are moving through your own Plutonian evolution, as opposed to, say, your partner, your parents, your children. So that's even just a great starting point when looking at the chart. But let's get into actual Pluto in Aquarius. That's what we're here for. So the main thing that I actually wanted to note, to be honest, is that Pluto isn't actually fully into Aquarius until November 19th, 2024. So he's going to do this dance between that sort of 0 and 1 to 2 degrees of Aquarius and the late degrees of Capricorn still for the next almost 2 years, really. So again, when you start to see all of this fanfare and all of this talk about Pluto's in Aquarius, remember, like, yes, it is. We are edging into that cycle, but it is not one that is going to be fully anchored until the end of 24 and really into 2025. We're going to have a retrograde into Capricorn in June of 2023, which I think is really important to touch on, because it's still going to move quite a few degrees back into Capricorn. So 2023 really still does have quite a Pluto in Capricorn signature to it, I feel, because Pluto will only actually get to 0 degrees and then retrograde. So I don't even think it barely makes it to 1 degree, does it, Tiani, off the top of my head? Yeah, it's just 0. So, I think to even start to have this, like, I mean, the discussion is important, absolutely, but to be thinking that Pluto is in Aquarius in 2023, I think we also just need to reel that in a little bit, because with something slow moving as Pluto, we don't just wake up one day and the new cycle is here. It will retrograde so many times, back between the signs. It's kind of like a slow, I imagine it like this kind of like, I'm getting like this image of like a ghost, like a warship, like a ghost warship that's just like edging through, the mists of the ocean, and there's nobody on it, and it's just like making, like those, like when steel makes that creaking, grinding kind of noise, like that's, and especially in Capricorn, right? If there was any sign to be making those kind of sounds, it would be Capricorn. So
that is such in 2020 great visual.
Yeah, it just kind of, I just saw this ship just floating across my desk.
Yeah.
I think that it's really, important that still in 2023 that we recognize that there is still, Capricorn themes to be worked through before we kind of, jump headfirst into this Aquarius cycle. Now, I wanted to do a little bit of like a journey through history with you guys today, because I love history, also whilst being conscious of the fact that, a lot of the history that we read is through the lens or, the viewpoint of people who aren't always telling the truth, right? Like history always speaks of the victor. And so I really encourage you, when you do look back in history in alignment with the astrology, that again, looking at it as more like the archetypal themes rather than like this happened, or that happened specifically, because, there's a bit of gray area with the things that we come across here, of course, but there's definitely some repeated themes going all the way back until, the Romans, really, that I found quite significant. And the overall kind of theme that I've seen is around, of course, revolution. Like if we think of Aquarius, we think of revolution, like that's easy, but the main one that really stuck out to me was in the 16th century, in the early part of the 1500s. That was the dissolution of the monasteries in England. That was the Protestant Reformation. We also had, my notes took 2 pages. We also had in the last cycle, so in the 18th century, in the late 1700s, we had both the American and the French Revolution. We also had the first fleet arriving in Australia during that time. So colonization is a massive theme of both Pluto in Capricorn and Aquarius. These two tend to cross over a lot, but being an Australian, I just wanted to bring that up around the first fleet too, because this is the first time that Australia is having that return. Now, it's not the Pluto return of Australia. People say that Australia officially, 1901, they say Pluto in Gemini, but we want to think about what was happening in Australia when colonizers first arrived, and that was the end of Pluto in Capricorn and this beginning of Pluto in Aquarius. And another little tidbit here, this is where I get a bit nerdy, but the actual date of the first fleet was the 13th of May, 1787. And I was like, 13th of May, I'm like, that date is like so familiar to me. Scott Morrison's birthday is the 13th of May. So the fact that he was voted out, thank God, I see as the beginning of a shift of starting to, you know, I'm not saying that the new government has like solved everything. That's never going to be. It's always, you know, a molding and a work in progress. But I found that kind of like a funny coincidence, you know, that we are starting in Australia to face things, to leave things behind in ways that we haven't done because we haven't had the opportunity. It's such a new country, and it's a country that is solely, you know, it's founded on colonization. So, you know, I would hope that with Pluto in Aquarius, like this could finally be a cycle, this next 20 years of change the date, hopefully, right? Like that's, and for those of you that aren't from Australia, of course, I know this probably, you're like, save the what? But as Australians, this is something that's really important. And I couldn't help but notice that correlation. You know, other things in history that came in, you know, during the 16th century was also the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. So what are we, you know, moving through at the moment? We're going through a huge reckoning of these time periods. And so we are having to face the consequences of so much that has happened in that period, like particularly the 18th century. You know, this was the age of enlightenment. This is when science really started to take off, you know, where philosophy had a revival again, you know, the new thought, the new religions. And again, we haven't moved back into a space of being fully immersed in that. And another little sort of tip that I would share with you when starting to unpack or understand the transpersonal planets, again, particularly Pluto, a little bit Neptune, but mostly Pluto, is it's so important to understand the axes of whatever sign Pluto is moving through. So, you know, the opposite of Aquarius is Leo. So as Pluto is moving through Aquarius, you know, we are transforming that space whilst also, you know, what's an opposition? It's that balance, right? So there is, of course, going to be Leo themes present, not as predominantly, of course. I'm not saying that, you know, Leo themes are more important, but it's really good to understand that axis. And again, I just couldn't help but, especially the time that we're recording this, you know, like it's actually the Queen's funeral today. Not that, I mean, big deal, but I found it really interesting that, you know, she has a Leo moon. She passed away when the moon was conjunct, moon and Saturn was conjunct her natal Jupiter and Mars in Aquarius. So again, having this release of the monarch, which if we think of, you know, a Leo archetype is often royalty and monarchs, it's interesting to see that these little sort of chess pieces are starting to shift, because in astrology, we feel things in applying aspects. Now, granted, Pluto is still retrograde again at the time of recording this. It's retrograde in Capricorn. But once Pluto stations direct, you know, we start to feel the intensity of things build as the planets apply, right? Like the actual conjunction or the sign shift or the house shift. That's the release point. You know, yes, something can come up in the midst of that, but most often, a lot of the things that you are working through around themes will happen in the weeks or months leading up to that actual event. So again, I kind of just see the timing of this quite important, given that she has a lot of planets on this axis and other fixed placements as well. But overall, with this kind of looking back first, as I said, there's a lot of issues around slavery, around revolution, the dissolution of monarchs, dissolutions of monasteries. You know, I think that we still live in a time that most of us don't really care for these things, but are we still holding on to them in ways that we're not completely conscious of yet? And I think that everything that's happening in England and the colonies at the moment is a great example of that. Like, you know, the billions of dollars being spent on a funeral, and countries, you know, that aren't even a part of the Commonwealth. You know, I think here in Portugal today, even it's like a day of honoring or something. I'm like, why? Like it's okay, but also
we've got a day of mourning.
Yeah, in Australia, right?
Yeah,
like
a public holiday on Thursday.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, come on, guys. Like, it's 2022 and coming into 2023. Like, but I bring this up because these are themes that are going to be coming up, because if we had the American and the French Revolution last time around, in this 20-year period, the likelihood of the people standing up in some capacity is here. The signature says it, whether it's in religion, like the monasteries in the 16th century, whether it was actually the breaking of the monarchs. I mean, let's talk about the current time period. Like, have things like monarchs and things really gone away? Like, think about celebrity worship culture. Why do we care so much about these people that have millions and billions of dollars? Like, they don't give a shit about us, right? You know, but people are still caught in this web of, you know, projection, or that somebody's going to come and save them. Pluto in Aquarius says the only person that is going to save you is yourself, but also your intimate communities. And I know we don't tend to think of Aquarius as intimate, but I think one thing we have to watch out with, whether it's in astrology or other like just spiritual new age things, is hyper individualization, because that can be a shadow of Aquarius. Like, we don't want to be thinking that we are the only person that can save ourselves to the extent of, you know, being more in that Leo axis, right? Where everything revolves around us. That's not it. It's about conscious community. And so these are themes that are going to be arising between now and 2024, because sorry, I didn't actually say when the period was going to be. I just jumped right in, as I do. But yeah, between 2023 and 2024, when Pluto will move into Pisces, there's definitely going, is that what I said? 2042 to 20. Sorry, I'm
it's
like,
okay. So 2024 to 2044 is Pluto in Aquarius.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry, there's too many fours.
Yes, there is. Yeah, no, it's okay.
So yeah, there's going to just be this kind of theme of, look, it sounds cliche, but like power to the people. Yes. But what happens sometimes when people get together? Mob mentality. We already see that happening a lot, you know, where, you know, people are judged before the court of the people rather than the court of law. And I think that this is something that is probably going to get worse before it gets better. That's the nature of Pluto as well. It all has to come up, right, before it can be, you know, progressed through. And I just would say to all of you to be more conscious, like on a personal level, of your reactions to things that don't potentially like directly affect you. Not again in a way of like everything has to be about you and that we don't care about what's happening in the world, but that you know, it's very easy, like, you know, human nature, it's been there since forever, like that pack mentality, you know, people just sometimes get swept up in a wave of whatever's happening without really being conscious of like, what do I think about this? You know, what is my, I don't want to say my truth because that's so ambiguous, you know, and I mean that everyone says what, you know, my truth is this now. And it's like, well, cool story. Like that resonates for you, but that doesn't have to be for everybody else. But it's this real kind of fine line, I think, between, of course, individualism and the collective and the community. So these are definitely going to be spaces that are being worked through on the broader scale. Now, to personalize this, you want to see what houses it's in, of course, right? So you may be moving through a space of, you know, revolution and revolting against something in your own life in accordance with these house themes. You know, and the other thing too, I know I'm jumping around a little bit and my apologies for that, everybody. I wanted to come back to this age of enlightenment stuff as well, because you know, this was such a prominent, like we're still living in that time, like so much happened in the 18th century that we still are dealing with the remnants of, you know, now I'm forgetting the, you know, like the Industrial Revolution, like, you know, we haven't come out of that. Not that we ever will fully come out of that, because these cycles build upon each other, of course, but this 20 years is going to be a time to like really get to the core of what is and isn't working around how we work, how we share and connect in community, how we show up, you know, in spaces that are resonant for us, and how we can also be more of a contributing member of our community or causes that are important to us. This is going to be huge as well. So Tiani, I want to pause, and if there's a question or anything like that, because I know I've just jumped around with like dates and things like that a little bit, but is that kind of like landing for you, or is there anything that kind of comes up when
I love it because you're the person that I needed and knew that would do this? And we all need to hear this because it is the beginning of this Pluto transit, so we can't get ahead of ourselves. To me, it's like we're going to be lubed up until November 2024. Like, it's literally, Pluto is taunting, and it's just like when Jupiter conjunct Saturn in Aquarius, everyone's, oh, it's the Aquarius age. No. And again, it's decades and decades of this deep transformation that has to take place. And when you were saying that, you know, some people go, oh, I felt Pluto go retrograde today. I'm like, you didn't, dickhead.
No, you didn't.
You didn't. But they're like, oh no, but I'm super sensitive to energies. And I'm like, yeah, so am I, baby. Like, I am Pluto. And we don't need to feel that, because that's not the point. It's exactly what you said. It's actually a deep collection of experiences that happen to us over time, and they become embedded, and we are watching all of these transformations happen, but it's a slow burn. It is a slow burn. It's not just this quick thing. And it is very fascinating that we will have, you know, Pluto in Aquarius for just 3 months. You know, it's just shy of 3 months, and that's him just entering. And for me, it is significant because, you know, we know that the 00 degree is this anaretic degree of pure, you know, purity, and we're getting it 3 times, which of course we're always going to get with these outer planets, because they do move in slowly and often move back, you know. So I also thought to speak of, you know, the American Pluto return at the moment. Again, like you're saying, like, what are we holding on to that's really outdated and that we actually haven't moved through as a culture, as a society? All of the colonization stuff, like everything you're speaking to is so prevalent, and again will be continually shown to us constantly over these next 20 years too. It's not just going to dissipate and dissolve. It's a process now, but it's fascinating because things are changing. But I think about the Pluto, you know, Pluto return for America, and it's this, oh, but this is the Constitution, that, you know, even just simple things like that, gun laws, and you're just like,
they cling to it more.
They're clinging, I know. So they're actually revolting against the change. So if you revolt and against the change, I mean, that's just going to be worse. Like, it feels nuclear. It honestly feels nuclear if you don't actually start to let go. But we've also got Aquarius, which is a fixed air sign. So try getting people to change their motherfucking minds, right? Like, it isn't just going to happen straight away.
Exactly. And that's something too, you know, is that yes, Aquarius, it's fixed. So it's not going to be this like, you know, love and light that people think Aquarius is, and that it's going to be like, we just get everything.
Who would ever think Aquarius archetype is love and light anyway? I mean, they obviously don't understand the archetype, is how I see it. When everyone's like, exactly, Aquarius age is going to be all of this. And I'm like, have you met an Aquarian who actually likes people? Because I'm yet to.
Why did I start this off by saying, like, I'm not afraid to say I don't like people. Like,
you didn't just say I don't like people. You literally emphatically went, I hate people. And we all got it. We all felt that, like, on a soul heart level, and we all died a little bit, but it's okay. We love you. But it's true. And there's this overarching love and light of rainbows and all these new astrologers that have come in who have no depth or experience, especially they probably don't even understand their own Pluto transits that they've had for 10 years because they actually haven't even looked at them. So the thing is that come to us when you understand the archetype, and don't love and light an Aquarius archetype in general, because it's not that. It's not what people are thinking it is.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I want to say about my emphatic hate of people.
It was so good. I was just like, okay, but I look, it's all good. I know Aquarius.
For those of you that don't know me, I promise you I don't actually hate to that extent, but it opens up an important discussion, because we have to look at where the world is at right now, and people, like, everything is so polarized and pitted against each other. And that is what can be exacerbated in this next 20 years. this doesn't mean, like we were just saying, this love and light or whatever the fuck people think Aquarius is, all these rainbows and stuff, because we're already seeing this kind of tension building of us versus them. I mean, that's the nature of revolution. But the way to like master this is instead of to be like, I hate my neighbor because they think differently to me. It's like, well, you know, I don't really get it, but that's their life and their perspective. And of course, we're not talking about, you know, racism and bigotry and you know, sexism and these types of things, like things that matter, of course, and that there is kind of, in a way, like there is a right and a wrong side of these things. I'm sorry, but there is, like, there's no like nuance when it comes to human rights. But you are going to find that what has been building around this us versus them definitely can implode. It has to, because it can't keep going like this, right? Like, we can't all keep pointing the fingers. There is going to be this point of like retribution, right? And
that's a good
the
word.
the revolution has to come from people banding together in that sense of, like I said, like even with celebrity worship culture and things like this, like, you know, if we think back at like the American and the French Revolution, you know, this turned into people realizing that even if I think differently to my neighbor, we're more alike than the king and I, right? So I have more in common with somebody who doesn't share the same beliefs as me than both of us do with like Kylie Jenner, right? So this is also what I mean of the power to the people in that sense of like, you know, pushing back against things like, you know, oligarchs. Like the monarchy didn't go away. America is just full of oligarchs now, as are, of course, other countries in the world. But, you know, instead of having these monarchies that sort of had all of this power and control, that's actually become individuals. And that's actually sort of scarier, right? That there is a few people in the world that maybe, okay, they invented an internet platform, you know, or they started selling books and now they sell the fucking world, that these people have more money than like some of the rest, you know, most people combined, right? But if we actually think of everybody else combined, this is where that power comes from. And so I bring up, you know, the examples too of the internet and stuff, because like, I think that we shift from like monarchies to oligarchs to technocrats. And this is what's going to come up a lot in this next 20 years as well, is like, you know, the bubble of the internet and the online sphere also is going to burst and change in some capacity. Now, is it going to go away? Of course not. It's only ever going to evolve. You know, if you would ever think of like, what is the meaning of life? It's change and evolution, right? Like that's the only thing that we can be sure of, is that what we have now is what will never just be. And so what we have now in this technology and online sphere is serving us now, but it will not always be this way. And I think that it is going to change into ways that stretch us beyond our comprehension, but we also have to reel that back in, because Pluto is about going within, right? Like Pluto is not an energy that you want to be in a space of like projecting with, because you're going to attract all kinds of stuff then, right? If you were in that sort of space with Pluto. And so we want to be like bringing this in and like how we can make, of course, conscious change, conscious evolution. Like we don't have to be ruled by these changes. We have to consciously understand how they work and find ways that apply to our own personal life and personal journey, you know, and trust that we are a part of that movement. Because with Pluto as well, you have to remember that part of your Pluto generation and what you were here to transform is very much around something that was sort of a signature of that Pluto transit generation at that time. Like I always think of Pluto in Scorpio, being my own, of course, and so I know that like the back of my hand. But I always think of, you know, Pluto moved into Aquarius when, you know, the AIDS pandemic came in, you know, where suddenly something
Pluto
like
moved into Scorpio when the AIDS thing came in.
That's not what I
said
said.
Aquarius, but that's okay. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Because Mercury's retrograde.
Look, I mean, I have Mercury retrograde in my natal chart. Like, it's a time.
It's
So
a time. It's a time. No, I just wanted people to know, Yeah.
No, thank you, Tiani. Like, I'm just a mess of signs and numbers and everything today. So
my earlier interview, we did the same thing. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good. I'm glad it's not
I was just like, oh, do you mean Chiron in Aries, not Chiron in Leo? And she's like, yes, I did. And it's okay. It's not bad. It's just, I'm the one sitting here listening and receiving. So it's easy for me to oh, she means this, just so everyone knows, right? It's easy.
Thank you for moderating.
Yes, I'm moderating.
So when Pluto moved into Scorpio, this was at the beginning of the 80s when we had the AIDS pandemic, and where suddenly, something like sex became something that was the most unsafe thing that you could do. And so children were being born in that time period with this fear of the body, of sex, of intimacy, all these Scorpio sort of spaces.
Taboo.
Yeah. And I think that as well, like Scorpio Pluto generation is also sort of like the first generation, not the first, right? Because we have to remember there was Pluto and Scorpio generations 250 years ago. And the way they showed up would, of course, been different to how we are all born and show up. But, we were sort of the first generation to really start talking about mental health. And, we were all young and miserable. Like, we created the emo genre, for God's sake. Like, we reveled in depression and, kind of being like, I'm anxious. What does this mean? And like therapy kind of became cool with the millennial generation because we're not afraid to go to those spaces that like maybe our Pluto and Leo parents. No, you just get on with life. You just carry on, you just go for a walk, eat a banana. That'll solve all your problems. Like,
eat a banana.
Okay. Right. I'm like, thanks, Dad. He's like, have you sat outside today? No, but like that'll fix all my problems, surely, won't it? Like, look, go outside, like get some sun on you. Absolutely. But like that sort of generational thinking, like that isn't going to solve all of the world's problems. And so we also have to understand that like there are children being born that are going to have this signature. So as much as Pluto in Aquarius creates this space for revolution, it may take until the children born in that generation are old enough to implement it. Right? Because, again, we don't live long enough to experience the full Pluto cycle. So it's taken until the millennials are old enough to start to really dive into like psychology and, sex and all of these things to a deeper space. For these things.
My goodness, I think even just so many your age and with Pluto and Scorpio, not that I'm condoning some of it because some of it's now this tantra work that's actually dangerous, but they've gone that way to go, well, right, I was so suppressed. And because the Pluto and Scorpio generation does have the ability to unearth and get to the grime of what's really going on, they're not afraid to reveal, they're not afraid to let fucking secrets out, right? Like they're going to do that. But then there is this, again, with all friggin' things, is the real shadow side of that. It's like now, the trauma, like not being properly trauma informed or being able to hold a space for someone that's genuinely gone through trauma because you don't, because you're just saying, oh, let's just steam our yonis and everything will be okay, dance naked and we're healing. Guess what? You're not. You're actually causing a lot more trauma. So but what other generation would do that? Like Pluto and Scorpio has to be the ones to do it because they're unearthing something that was deeply suppressed.
Yep. And this is it's so important. And I think what's also happening with that generation specifically is that like Pluto in Capricorn is sextiling that Pluto. And so that is ease. It's easy to feel like Pluto's okay for me right now because Pluto's sextile Pluto. Like it's not a major sort of transit. Like most millennials, like we haven't started going through our Pluto square yet. So if anything, get ready to be humbled, right? Like on the back of your Pluto square. And we have to remember, because Pluto is taking longer to move through each sign, the Pluto squares are coming later in life.
We spoke about this for ages,
yeah,
remember?
Right. So for me, it's like age 42, but for you, Tiani, it was what, 38?
37 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for your daughter, she will have it.
What did we say? It was like 60, which is 60. Ludicrous. 60.
Right?
Going through her Pluto square. Like I can't even deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is important to remember too, is that so much, like, I think as human beings, like, we want, like, we do have this naivety and innocence about us that we, you know, especially people that are really impassioned about things, like, we put in so much work because we want to see the result. But when we start to talk about the transpersonal planets, you have to understand that so much of the work that you were putting in to either that natal Pluto or that transit energy, you have to sort of reconcile within yourself that what you were working for may not manifest in your generation, in your time and space, but that can't deter you from doing the work anyway, right? Because we don't do it for the accolades. We don't do it for the Leo, right? It's not to be seen and, oh, I'm so, you know, amazing and because I did this or that. And I'm not saying that Pluto in Leo people all do that. I'm speaking archetypally here. You know, so much of what we are doing is for generations to come, and we have to trust in that, even though we are living in times that we just feel like we want to scream and just give up. It feels like, you know, it's like an echo chamber, like, you know, the same people that have the same agreements, we all see it and talk about it and we get it. And it's like, why can't other people see it? But we have to trust through having those conversations, by showing up, being dedicated. You know, I think that Pluto has a lot of, you know, themes around dedication, and because it's will, it's power and will. And so it shares a similarity to Saturn in that sense. You know, Saturn isn't the only planet that is about direction and life force and things like this. You know, they both are malefic, right? So they come with more of the death side of that and the cycle endings. But, you know, I say that just my sort of, to wrap that up would be, you know, don't expect these themes of revolution and all of this to actually all manifest in the next 20 years. We want as many of them that are important as possible to occur, of course, but a lot of what will be coming up will take until those generations. Because if we think about Pluto in Capricorn, right, like, and I can admit maybe I was guilty of this throughout the transit. It was way back in 2008 when it began. You know, we tend to think of it as like, oh, like all of the, you know, the oligarchs or the big corporations, they're going to fall and crumble. And we get here to the end of Pluto in Capricorn and it's like, fuck, some of these have more power than they ever did, right? And so that's sort of what I mean by, I think that we are waking up and we're starting to see that now, like hopefully you were seeing that. And so I think that it will take the children with that Pluto signature to really start to bring those structures down. And so we have to look at Pluto as kind of the cycle of putting in the work, the momentum for what's to come. But the themes of that Pluto may not always necessarily culminate in that 20-year period. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really love that too. It just made me think of my youngest daughter who's about to turn 12. She actually has Pluto and Capricorn. My other two daughters have Pluto and Sag.
Okay.
So Pluto and Capricorn. She's got Pluto and Capricorn conjunct her North Node, but I know she's a stellium in Sag, but literally she just doesn't understand school. She's just like, why are we doing this? We don't need to be here. This is stupid. This is rubbish. And again, it's an outdated system that a 12-year-old can pick up on, because Pluto in Capricorn is the dismantling of old structures and old systems to make it very digestible. Like that's an easy way. You know, it's one of the things that Pluto in Capricorn, you know, is doing and will do. But I love that you've said that it's not just going to happen for us to experience. And I love that you've sort of, you know, spoken to these new generations, that actually it's these children and what they're going to instill and what's going to happen for them and how they're going to question or bring these you know, archetypes or old things to the ground. So it, you know, Pluto might be in a completely different sign, then it might be in Taurus or whatever, but it doesn't matter because they've grown up in this time with this placement, and they're already seeing what needs to change, what doesn't make sense. You know, they're doing it. Whereas, you know, I wasn't questioning the government or school when I was 11. Like that's not something that I was doing, but I loved school. Like I hated home. So school was great for me.
right? So for you, it's like friends, social. Like I don't go to school to learn. I go to school to talk and chat
and have 8 million boyfriends. Absolutely. You know, like that's the thing. Like for me, it was completely different. Whereas she's already questioning things, questioning the government, questioning those sorts of things. And obviously she's got two very open parents that talk a lot about, you know, a lot of things, from colonization to all the things, you know, we, you know, very open with all of those sorts of things. But I love that you've just mentioned that. I just think that's really, you know, that's just really banging out, Katie. I really think that that's powerful, a powerful little note.
I'm glad that it lands, because it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, you know, because I think we put so much pressure on ourselves, especially as people who love astrology, or again, any type of sort of spiritual practice, is that sometimes we can overburden ourselves with like, well, now that I have all this knowledge, I have to fix everything. And you like, the transpersonal planets aren't here to be fixed by an individual. It is a collective process. And so if you show up in alignment with how they are showing up in your own chart, that is the best way for you to, you know, navigate that evolution in your own life, and trusting that by following those instincts, it sort of, you know, everyone starts to link together. But these things take time, because like I think about when I was at school, like I said, the example of being like emo, right? Like I was 14, like I wasn't at a space yet to actually be like learning about being trauma informed. I was still going through trauma, right? You know, I wasn't old enough. I maybe went to therapy as a teen a bit, but I, you know, it wasn't in the way that I'm able to work with that now. But I knew that, like going to therapy, like going to the school counselor, I was like, this can't be it. This can't be it. Like, this is almost worse than what's going on at home, right? Like, and so it was already like for your daughter, like she's recognizing like, okay, this isn't working, but she's not old enough to change the system, right? But through her experience of like realizing like this did not work for me, you know, she is then able to implement that, as are her peers, in whatever way that shows up, right? Because again, to think that the entire schooling system, the way it is just going to cease, that's not practical, right? Things build upon each other, they morph and evolve. Some things do need to be cut off completely, but again, that doesn't just happen overnight, right? Like we didn't just stop things that happened 1,000 years ago just now. Like it's an integrative process. Yeah, and so I hope that that lands for some of you, to maybe just take off that pressure a bit, like, oh, Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius, revolution, the revolution is here, you know. Yes,
we're going to start the revolution, we're going to start the revolt. And it's like, are you?
Because what happened? Because like, yes, be at the forefront of things that matter to you, absolutely, but also be conscious of energy leaks, because Pluto leaks out, right? And so you may not realize things that are actually like siphoning from you. And so again, like look at the house that it's in to understand where to bring that energy into, instead of getting entangled. Again, maybe we could just look at that opposing axis, right? Like that could be a place that you're like letting it out in a way that's not necessarily the best way to be managing it. Or of course the square signs too. Like definitely look at the fixed axis as a whole and how that shows up in your chart, to see, you know, where it's actually taking place, Pluto. Where you're feeling pushed into a corner would be Scorpio and Taurus. Those houses are going to make you feel a bit trapped. And your Leo house is going to show you where you need to integrate and release with that Pluto in your Aquarius house in a consistent cycle. That's kind of a way that I would say you could, bigger picture over 20 years, understand where your energy has been plugged into, and also maybe drained or released in a way that maybe doesn't feel quite comfortable with you. But it is, of course, part of that evolutionary journey and process. You know, we can't avoid these things. We just learn how to manage them more consciously.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Those fixed houses, you know, they're still going to get a huge workover. And I, you know, thinking of that sort of Leo Aquarius axis, you know, I was writing here when Katie was talking earlier around healthy individuality, because you know, a lot of people are sheep, and as much as Aquarius thinks they're the rebel or thinks they're unique, there's still an element of collective consciousness, that they're not willing to stand in their own sovereignty, Leo, within the group Aquarius. So that's where we can start to channel in this healthy individuality and this healthy sense of identity and self-expression, where we're not leaking out or seeping out or just going along with what everyone else says. You know, it takes a very strong individual to stand within the crowd and not agree with what everyone else is saying. And I actually wrote in my 2023 kit, actually, from the book of Pluto by Stephen Forrest, and I'm just going to read this little thing because I think it's really quite amazing. All geniuses are misunderstood. That's built into the definition of the word. To succeed, one must develop thick skin regarding our basic need for approval. To hold the truth with which everyone agrees is easy. To hold one against the tide of popular assumptions is vastly more arduous. How does the psyche adapt? There are healthy answers, or all geniuses would be mad as well as misunderstood. And they're not. And that, I think, it really sums up, because I am a North Node Leo, South Node Aquarius, that when you stand sovereignly as an independent individual, you help the collective more by just buying into everything than just being swept up in something. And I think that that's to be shared, to step into our own sense of sovereignty, which Lilith in Leo is asking, which the North Node in Aries, Mars, is asking, where, you know, just next year, you know, we're being ushered into healthy self-individualization, healthy self, like Katie said, know where this is happening in your own chart, because you know, that's just such a North Node Leo thing. I'm just like, look at it in your own chart. Like, just look at it in your own chart. I mean, you've got a Leo moon. So it's about what's happening when you are the change. It ripples out to the collective. But when you're so focused, and maybe like what Katie said before, you're so focused on fixing and going, no, but I want to be this revolutionary, blah, 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 and fight and rebel, which, you know, Pluto's moving into Aquarius, Uranus's sign, Uranus is in fixed Taurus. So, you know, there's a very interesting dynamic going to happen for those few months. And over the time until, you know, November 2024, when, you know, when Pluto actually makes his full ingress. And then we do have Uranus moving into Gemini. So we're going to get a whole different array of what Pluto in Aquarius looks like, with his ruler being in fucking air sign Gemini, making a trine. It is wild shit that's coming up.
And that's really important too, because a few of the previous Pluto in Aquarius cycles, not all of them, because they don't always link up, but at least two of them. I'm almost certain the one in Henry VIII's time, so the 16th century, that came with Uranus in Gemini and Neptune in Aries. Wow. So they're the time periods I think that we really need to look to, because again, so much of what happened in the 1500s still was happening in the 1700s, right? It just morphed through technology and through being able to go out in the world further to fucking colonize, right? Like that still continued, but instead of just colonizing like your next door neighbor or the, you know, the tribes, it was like really going out and colonizing the world. And now, you know, the death of the queen on the ingress of this shift, like these are important signposts, you know. And definitely like that quote, like I love Stephen, like I love Stephen. His quotes just always land so perfectly.
That was just a part of his book, and when I was reading it, I'm like, oh my God, this has to be put in my kit. And I looked at it before we jumped on here, and I'm like, I have to read that, because there's something in that. And again, I always, you know, even with our own Pluto in our chart, looking at the axis of the other side of Pluto, and, you know, and as in like the opposite sign and house that you're actually filtering him through is so important. So when you brought that, I was like, I'm so glad you brought it up, because I'd written it down to bring up. So I was so glad that you brought up the Leo stuff, you know, because it's a sense of change, you know. For me it's that sovereignty and self, not in a selfish way, but in this healthy with a healthy identity that seeks out and helps to revolutionize the collective, you know. And
exactly,
I don't know, maybe not from anger, because when you're solid in yourself, like it doesn't have to be from anger. That's, you know, but I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Exactly. No, and that's true, you know. And I think that like we just want to ensure that yes, we are focusing on healthy individualism, but also consciously showing up in community, because we don't want to be an individual to the extent that we don't care about anybody else. And I think the pandemic really showed how polarizing that became, of where do people stand on things. And
absolutely,
I think that, you know, we have to then be conscious, like, or aware that if that's already happening in Pluto in Capricorn, that's going to continue into the next cycle, you know. And Aquarius and Leo, I don't want to say that it's more sensitive than like water signs, but having both of them in my chart as my moon and my sun, like ego is like really sensitive in this space. You know, there's a lot of imposter syndrome and not feeling worthy and valued. And so Pluto is going to just like blow that to smithereens, right? Like, and that can either be a process that you're on board with and you're willing to do the work in unpacking that, or it's going to just like beat you down, you know. And so where that imposter syndrome on a personal level shows up again, look to the houses, right? It's going to be different for all of us. For me, it's like going to be my 6th and my 12th house. For you, Tiani, it's your 4th, 3rd,
5th and 11th.
5th and 11th. That's right. So yeah, you know, like how you and I are going to move through these is going to be vastly different. And where you're having the move is where I had them opposite before. And so I won't ever have it in the same pattern as you, but I'm just coming out of Pluto in my 11th. So yeah, see, like there's a lot that this is how we learn from each other, because we don't all have the opportunity to have the same transits, but there's always somebody who's having like the reversal of what you're having. Even with the nodes, like if you want to understand your north node, talk to somebody who has their south node there, or vice versa. Like that's how you really get to the core of like where you should be going and what you should be leaving behind. So there's so much to learn from that opposing axis, and definitely from a space of integration rather than just straight up rejection, I think. And especially with Leo, because Leo does not want to be rejected. So, you know, that's going to be a big theme coming up.
Yeah, definitely.
I've talked a lot.
I
hope that been for everybody.
It has been amazing, Katie. My goodness, it has been so amazing. I love it. I'm, you know, I'm always, to me, I'm like 2020s frothing all the transits, you know, like there's not an ounce of fear that's come up around, you know, Pluto moving into Aquarius, or, you know, like there's nothing to fear in astrology. And I think as an astrologer, the 2020s is just like this constant thing that we get like every year, and Neptunes and Saturns and Uranus, and it's just been wild and it's exciting. And you know, I love to be able to look back like what you have just gifted us in this interview, for us to be able to start to put, like you called it, chess pieces, which I loved, you know, putting those chess pieces together of, oh, isn't that fascinating, the monarchy, the queen, the this, the that, and starting to put it all together into what we're going to start to see become unraveled during this next 20 years, and, you know, start to see the prominence of this in our lives more so. But, you know, it's interesting too, because, you know, of course, Capricorn and Aquarius are both Saturn-ruled signs. You know, Saturn in Aquarius has been shit, probably one of the worst transits. I can't stand it. It's been shit. Sorry for anyone. Actually, I feel sorry if you have natal Saturn in Aquarius. Fuck that. It's way too, you know, give me Saturn in Capricorn any day of the week. But what's happened is, you know, we're watching Saturn move through Aquarius, and then Pluto's coming in behind him. So sort of we know that there's going to be an amplification of what's gone on, you know, a crystallization. And, you know, I've talked about, this condensed, you know, because we're moving into this fixed sign now. So it's, you know, have we got a preview with Saturn in Aquarius? Maybe, you know, maybe. It's, of course, the mystery of Pluto and Aquarius entices me, that we can, you know, as we've shared, like we, you know, you shared before we jumped on the call, that it's not about just predicting what will happen. It's about look at your own chart, move through this transit, look at the polarity, which Katie has talked about so well, but look back at the cycle to start to see the unravelings and these chess pieces fall. Like, you know, it's sort of like, you've just nailed it so well that, you know, I'm trying to say words and I'm like, I don't even need to say words.
It's perfect, love. Like it's exactly it. And I think that, you know, one thing to also just kind of consider to wrap up is like, just with this decade, is that this is a decade of adjustment. Like we have all four, I include Chiron as a transpersonal planet, fight me. But, you know, all four of them are changing signs within a few years of each other. Like if you were not open to the change, you know, it's going to be pushing up against that river, that flow. You know, we're also coming to Saturn in Pisces and eventually Pluto in Pisces in 20 years. So like water and flow and being malleable is also going to be important, but we're just in a very fixed time period, you know, and Saturn in Aquarius is hard. Like I always say, Aquarians aren't like, yes, they're future orientated, far-sighted, but it's very easy to pick an elder Aquarian out in the crowd because they're usually stuck in whatever was far out 20 or 40 years ago. You know, that's why Aquarius is seen as like the old hippie. And it's like, yeah, like that period of time was really important and revolutionary, but like you have to evolve with the revolution. You can't stay stuck there. So Saturn in Aquarius or Aquarius placements, just like, you know, Saturn in Capricorn, but worse, I think, because it's fixed, absolutely get stuck in the past. Like, I know you don't think of Aquarius in past, but it's Saturn ruled, you know, it's not this free thinking revolution that we always think it is, you know. And
I remember being like a teenager and my best friend was a Leo, and you know, I'd read all the astrology books, you know, like it's my language, it's all I care about. I know everyone in my classes, signs, and my teacher and all the things, right? Yeah. And there's this real weird thing around, you know, this definitely the Leo and Aquarius axis. Just like, oh, there's just so like, you know, the Leo is so like creative and you know, like loves adventure. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, there couldn't be more. And I mean, even at that point, was I even using the word fixed and not knowing the modality at 14 or whatever? But, you know, just seeing, going, this doesn't fit, like this isn't adding up. And then as you actually start to understand the archetype, it isn't just all as it seems. You know, there's so many more layers to, you know, all the signs in general, of course, all the archetypes. It's not just these basic sort of, you know, cookbook sort of things anymore. And it never has been. But the thing is that Leo and Aquarius axis definitely is, you know, super sensitive. And, you know, yes, there's this genius and progressive, you know, I do see that, you know, this collective energy, like it's exactly what you said, like the love for humanity is there, which often you think, really, like the Aquarius loves humanity, but there is, because their vision is different to what, you know, that's just a part of their archetype. Like they have this bigger vision, this grander vision. And, you know, I've been saying it for ages, you know, Elon Musk has a North Node in Aquarius, and as much as everyone hates him, he is a true visionary. Mars and fucking Tesla and all the shit that he's doing, like AI, metaverse, all these things. This is the Aquarian age. I'm sorry, it's not Woodstock, my friends. Like it is not Woodstock. It is AI. It is metaverse. It is people living in a metaverse, which, like my husband keeps pointing out, he goes, people are already doing that. People are already living in a metaverse. Like that's what's happening. It's just going to be taken to the fucking extreme. And I think that can be a very big word for Aquarius too, is the extreme. You know, we're going to see rat shit that we've never seen before. That's going to literally, we're going to be saying, I think I wrote it, what the actual fuck? You just married a dog? What? You have had a baby that's just been born from nothing and it's not even a conceived sperm. These are the things that are Aquarius. And it's because you know, some people want a microchip in their brain. You know, me and my husband were talking about this years ago when we were having coffee. And I mean, look, it's not for me and it's not how I want to live. But some people want that because they want to live longer and their brains to be accelerated. It's just like a computer upgrade. There's going to be brain upgrades. Like it's wild shit. So we have to there has to be flexibility even from us individually, I think, on some level. And you don't have to partake in these things. That's where we can call in the Leo stuff too, is you can stay in your healthy individualization and your healthy identity, but the collective is changing, and it's changing dramatically. And I think that, we're going to see some weird shit.
Yeah, I mean, because think of the 18th century and how weird, like, science
we must be to them.
Yeah, but like the things that they were starting to have, like the Industrial Revolution, like some of the first vaccines were patented in the late 1700s. Like they were first able to be, safe to administer. Like this is really important shit. Like things that we could not survive without now came into being in that time period, as every Pluto transit, of course. But, this lens of technology and science and progression is huge. But there's definitely this element to be mindful of like clinging to things that are supposed to shatter and break. Because Aquarius, I think they're more stubborn than Taurus. I mean, my partner's a Taurus, and I'm probably way more hell-bent on stuff than he is, but if you pick up any astrology book, it's like I would be having to deal with him being more like that, but it's me for sure. And it's just important to be conscious of, because things that you think you're revolting against are things that you're probably, like, the process of that, letting go is maybe clinging more and not recognizing that. Like, you don't want to wait another 20 years to realize you were holding on to shit that's like gotta go, and that's applicable to any Pluto transit. But from now on going, remember, we are always adding years to every Pluto transit. And so each Pluto transit in the sign is coming more into focus. So, Pluto in Capricorn felt like fucking forever, but that was 16 years. Now it's going to be like 20 to 22 years. And then after that, it's going to be I think it's almost up to, it's not quite at 30 yet, but it must be about 25 or 26 years for Pluto in Pisces. So like,
and then Aries, and then because Pluto in Taurus is the longest, 30,
at 30, exactly. So Scorpio the lowest at 12, and Taurus at the longest at 30. So we are only adding time, like, so in a way, time is on our side to really get into the core of these things. Like, we're not rushing through it like Pluto in Sag or Libra or Scorpio that were quite small. And maybe this is where this sort of inherent sort of collective consciousness comes in of like, everything has to be manifest now. And it's like, you have to stay true to what you're working towards and trust that that's a process. And whenever that comes into being is when that is the right time. You can't walk away from the revolution because you can't see it yet. You just have to trust that you're a part of it and trust your own ethics, right? Like, if you don't have ethics, what do you have, right? Like, you have to stay true to that whilst being a part of the collective and doing things that are helping others in the community. Maybe it doesn't benefit you personally, but by you being able to be conscious and a part of that, you were allowing space for support for other people. And it's a big thing too. But yeah, I feel like we've expressed all of that. I think we wanted to I wanted to keep this at like under 45. So I hope this hasn't gone too close to an hour, because, we like short bits of information, but I feel like this has probably gone over time. So
I think it might have. I can't remember. I think maybe we're over an hour, but that's okay.
I think it's a good wrapping up point, I think.
Absolutely. There was a lot covered, and I am just so grateful to have you on and, bringing all of that to our consciousness, because we need to hear all of those things, and it really puts it into our psyche that, this is the long journey, this is the slow burn. Pluto's the slow burn. So, and looking at those cycles, and, it was, everything that you shared was just so bang on and nailed it as usual. And I'm so grateful that you got to sort of share all of that info on Pluto and Aquarius. Thank you.
And thank you. I really appreciate the conversation and the space and the work you're doing in having this panel. Like, it's always a joy and an honor to be part of it. So thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. All right, darling. Thank you so much. And thank you all
Thank
for
you.
listening, and enjoy the rest of the panel. Bye.